Welcome Giridhar Sanjeevi. Thank you for doing this. I want to be respectful of your time and harness this rich experience you have on the subject you and me both are very passionate about, corporate governance, particularly in the context of related party transactions.
Thanks, Bhupendra.
Why corporate governance? Why it is important, particularly in the context, the way world today is and the way Indian capital markets are?
I think corporate governance is something that has to be top of mind of every corporate. Today, if you look at the way capital markets are developing, I think beyond the promoters, as they seek capital from the markets, you have the domestic institutions, you have the FIIs, and you have the retail investors. All the three segments are now increasingly investing in companies. When I look at FIIs and also domestic companies, the requirements for governance is becoming very, very significant. I think the core thing that promoters should remember is that investors have a choice of either putting money in your company or putting money somewhere else actually. So there are funds like, for instance, Stewart Advisors, I'm mentioning that company, who when you meet them for any investment purposes, they don't discuss your business, they only discuss governance actually, which means that they take the business as given, they have done their research. So the questions are not anything about business, they only spend the entire 1 hour in terms of how the company is governed actually. And if you look at retail investors, because a lot of financialization of the economy is happening and retail investors are pouring a lot of money into the markets, and ultimately it is their hard-earned money, and I think companies need to be careful to make sure that they don't lose money actually. So I think so governance is becoming multiple, and secondly I think it's all about value creation. I think sometimes promoters tend to forget that their value is created when others buy the stock and drive up the prices actually, and I think you have to remember that actually. So governance is something which is non-compromisable, and you have now seen many examples where if you see some news around bad governance, then immediately the shareholders kind of pull the plug actually. And the final point I will say is that the regulators are getting increasingly conscious, because to create that environment of trust, I think beyond self-governance, I think the regulators have a big oversight, which is SEBI, and you see SEBI coming out with different circulars on different parts of the oversight actually, and therefore you need to be on the right side of law as well actually.
Perfect. So I think the transparency and accountability is at the foremost of these regulations, and with the retail participation, this has become necessity. Now Giri, you have been on both the sides of the table, right? You have been CFO for large listed companies where you have ensured that you put a right structure. Now in the new avatar you are a mentor for these startups and kind of showing them the path towards right governance. You are also independent director. So how different stakeholders, what are their roles and responsibilities of each of these stakeholders who are bestowed with this responsibility?
I think this question that you ask is a really important one. In fact, if you look at the kind of stakeholders who are important in ensuring governance, I think it starts with the management team, then the CFO and the managing director in particular, then it goes to internal audit, then statutory auditors and the independent directors on the board, in particular the audit committee as well as the whole board actually. Now I think the framework to look at it in terms of ensuring good governance is the 3 lines of defense actually. Essentially, if you look at governance needs to be self-diagnostic and self-correcting. So which means that within a company, the CEO and the CFO and the leadership team should ensure that the respective units in a company are all self-diagnostic and self-correcting actually, because ultimately you don't want audits to go in and find out there are lapses. So if it is a hotel company, at a hotel unit level, people should be self-diagnostic and self-correcting actually. So that is level 1 in terms of the first line of defense. Then you have the oversight mechanisms, which is at say the regional level and his leadership team level, which ensures that not only are units self-diagnostic, but there is oversight to ensure that this oversight actually works, that to ensure that the units are actually performing to the level, and so for quality of oversight becomes the second line of defense. Then within a company, the third line of defense is really the internal audit actually. Internal audit ensures that the first and the second lines of defense are working actually. So this is one part of it. Added to this is the external auditors, who also independently look at internal financial controls and comment on it, and they also give areas for improvement, which the management team needs to work upon actually. So this is within the company by the leadership team with the auditors, that is internal and external. Now comes the role of the board actually. If you look at the role of the board, I think we should look at what NAFRA is saying actually. NAFRA is actually taking a very interesting view where they are saying that the company is the first line of defense, the audit committee is the second line of defense, and the external auditors is the third line of defense actually. So which means what this brings into focus is the role of audit committees in particular actually, where there is a role of oversight actually. And this oversight today has to be what NAFRA is increasingly pushing for, is that the audit committees need to ask the right questions. They need to engage with not just the CFO and CEO, but also internal audit as well as the statutory auditors, and also document. They are basically saying that the oversight by the audit committees need to be demonstrated with board evidence fundamentally actually, which means through minutes of meetings and all of that. So the role of audit committees in terms of not just not just doing the oversight but demonstrating oversight is now becoming important. And of course there's a role of statutory auditors who they look at it as a third line of defense, and they're also emphasizing the quality of interaction between the statutory auditors, the company and the audit committees actually. So hence I think this whole governance framework is an interplay of the different players that we have talked about, and unless these work well, you will always have challenges actually. And therefore with reference to a listed company in particular, I think this is becoming a big focus. So hence I think the internal stakeholders, which is the management team, internal auditors, statutory auditors, board members, then the external regulators, all of these come together to get into a robust governance actually.
And with all the stakeholders, the role of independent directors is sort of stepping out, because they are sort of guardian of the corporate governance. Plus, as we say nowadays, governance is not just to be done but need to be seen.
Yes.
And that has to be demonstrated to the largest stakeholders, investors, so that their trust is continued in the system, in the company.